Hello everybody, John Fulford here. I hope you're doing well. I'm doing great. Thanks for asking. Please click the link in the description to pre-save the Band in Heaven cover EP out in June on Cash Grab Records. You could pre-save it to your favorite streaming service or whatever and get on the mailing list for Cash Grab Records. I'm super excited about it. I know the Band in Heaven worked really hard on the songs, and I can't wait till it finally gets released. It's been a long time coming, so if you want to support the channel, click on the link. It costs you nothing, but it would mean a lot to us. So, this episode is featuring Mark Phillips and Angelo from the band Fishbone. We're all working together among some other really great musicians on a project that John Fulford Music is putting out, later this summer. And we're just talking about it. We're just vibing with it. There's a lot of jump cuts in the episode because we were hanging out and talking, and then we would veer into some talk about the actual release, which we're not ready to divulge yet. So I kind of had to cut some things, especially the end. It ends a little abruptly, but the conversation veered into talks about artwork and release dates and things like that. So we had to cut that out, obviously. And just get to the story of Fishbone and how they started and what they're doing now and everything in between. Angelo talks at length about his experiences doing music for TV, TV, film licensing, and everything like that. I'm looking a little sunburned today because we had a party at Casa Johnson, one of my short-term rental properties. A bunch of people from the gym came by. And it was a great time. Maserati Steve came in from Jacksonville, and it was really fun. I took a bunch of video, and that will be featured on my Hollywood John channel. Link also in the description if you want to give that a follow. I haven't been posting a lot. Well, I haven't been posting a lot to any of my channels, but I've already taken a bunch of videos for the Hollywood John channel to start editing and cutting up and putting on the channel. It's been super fun. For now, let's get right into the podcast episode. Thanks again for watching, and don't forget to pre-save the Band in Heaven link in the description. Here we go. John Fulford, Mark Phillips, and Angelo from Fishbone. Mark Phillips from Fishbone, how are you doing? Thanks for joining us here.
I'm doing awesome. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, man. Yeah, glad we could link up. Before we get to all the jibber jabber about the project we did together,
Yes.
I want to talk about Fishbone for a little bit, if you don't
Cool.
mind.
Yeah, let's do it.
So I first heard about Fishbone, obviously, from the logo. The logo has to be one of the most iconic logos in all of music and all of rock and roll as a whole. So I would go to the store, the music store, the record store, looking for, $3.99 used tapes of Metallica and Megadeth and things like that. And I'd always see the logo on a T-shirt, in the rack, And then I saw it, but I didn't know what it was. I didn't know if it was a brand, a band, or anything. And then some estranged family members briefly became unestranged and moved to Florida from Van Nuys, of all places. And
Right.
one of them had a duffel bag full of tapes of these LA bands from, that era. I call it, even though Fishbone was made in the late 70s, I believe, this was the music that they had was from the Predator 2 era of LA, meaning that movie Falling Down with Michael Douglas.
Oh, yeah.
And O.J. Simpson, Chase, Terminator 2, Predator 2, like that. Where they showed LA as just being hot. It was just that heat radiating.
Yeah.
That's that era. So there was Jane's Addiction and all these bands, and sure enough, there was Fishbone. So I was that's I put two and two together. So I was vibing with it ever since. Now I got to tell you something else, which I don't know if you're gonna believe me, but
try.
our mutual friend David could kind of vouch because I told him this when it happened. But last summer when we first met, I was up one night thinking to myself here in Gainesville, and I said, do you know what a really great band would be to work with? A band like Fishbone. that
Oh, wow.
is unique. Yeah, unique, but not too unique. Like not like it's not too unique for
It's
their
not
own good.
Sun
Not doing
Ra.
some weird stuff that no one will even listen to, like screeching seal music or something. Like not Seal the singer, like a seal animal, but still.
Yeah.
Yeah, totally. Oh, I got a Sun Ra brief one time. Forget about it. I didn't know what to do.
Yeah.
So I call up our
Right.
mutual friend David. Yeah. So I was talking to David about something else, and he said, I know a guy, Mark. He's in a band called Fishbone. And I was like, you'd never believe. I was just thinking about Fishbone the night before. Like, literally, this isn't a joke. It's not stretching the truth. It's not making some sort of punchline podcasting. 12 hours before, I was thinking about what a great group of artists it would be to work with. And then so I told David, I was like, we got to do this, So that's how I that's how I got the idea. It was like it came from like the music ether, into
Yeah,
my
man. That's how
into my
all good
head.
ideas come.
Yeah, dude, for sure. So, how did you first get linked up with Fishbone?
Um, so my journey begins with guys I grew up with. They were brothers, the Sweezies, Dumont and Byron. Who Byron was a little bit older and he had a fake ID, so he like got around more. And this is circa 1985, and he saw them, I think, at the 930 Club in DC, and
Okay.
he got the vinyl of the EP right away and brought it home, and they would bump that at their house. And then Dumont got the cassette, he was in my grade, and we just bumped it all the time and thought they were so awesome. And like I said, the older one had a fake ID, so he got to go see them a bunch of times, like before I ever did. And we just would sit there and get psyched and just be like, "Fuck, this is so awesome," like. And
Yeah.
then I had, that was in like 10th grade or whatever. And then I had my own little band. I had my own little. I joined a group in DC that was doing a little bit of playing around here and there. And the night before I took my SATs, we had a gig in Charlotte, North Carolina, at the Pterodactyl Club, and it was opening
Okay.
for Fishbone.
Oh, very cool.
Yeah, and it probably paid $75 between four guys. So we drive all the way from like DC to Charlotte and do this gig, and it's just like for me at 17 or whatever, like this is just so badass, like I just stood there in awe, and pretty much the whole time did sound check and all that, and just waited around the club and just I just hung kind of by the soundboard as they opened doors and shit, and just like it was just such an exciting energy. And then we played, and then when they played, I can't even describe it. It's just something that I'll never ever forget, that will be with me always, which is like the energy of, I don't know what that place holds, maybe 1,000, 1,200, something like that. But the energy of that many people singing "Say It Loud, I'm black and I'm proud,"
Yeah,
and jumping up and down. The irony being, most of them were indeed not black, but
yeah.
that's neither here nor there. But it was just rad. It was just rad
Yeah.
energy, and I'm just like, holy shit! These guys are solving all the musical problems that exist right now. Like they are melding like shaman or like alchemists. They're putting it all together in a way that I was ready for, like musically. I had enough sort of music background in terms of like a little bit of classical training and a little bit. I think I'd been to Berkeley at that point, and like,
Oh, wow.
yeah, for like a summer or whatever. But like,
Oh, okay.
I sort of had my general. I was up for challenging music. I was really up for it, but they were up for it in a way that was just blowing my face off, man. Like, they were like in the middle of the song "Alcoholic," which is a total like kind of ska jam, going into "Back in Black," and I'm like, whoa.
Wow. That's wild.
The whole night was just like that, and I just couldn't. Driving back in the van on the way home, of course, just like, wow. And then here's a really weird, like, million years later, coda on the whole story. Their guitar player actually flew back to LA that day, and
Huh.
did not play the show.
Huh.
Kendall had a death in the family, his mother, and he was not able to do that particular show. So there actually was this 10-minute period before their sub guy like actually, arrived because they had somebody,
Yeah. Yeah.
where I was like kind of talking to their front of house tour manager guy, and I was like, dude, if your guy doesn't show, I got this.
Really?
Totally. I was like, in my head, I'm like, I don't have this at all, but fucking A, I'll
Yeah.
figure it out.
Yeah. Totally.
And so their guy showed up. It was a friend of theirs that kind of flew in and did an awesome job as a ringer. Like you would have never. The show went on flawlessly. And then every time I saw them subsequent to that, I escaped the vacuum of what was happening in the DC music scene at that time. Was musically not horribly interesting to me, which in part like is a bit of an admission that some of it caught up to me later. Like for example, the band Fugazi was just starting. Fugazi is an awesome band who at the time didn't, it's awesome. Their DIY ethic and there's a whole way that they went about things that was sort of antithetical to the music industry. And that was sort of the style of a lot of the bands in that scene were very like, you work at the food co-op and like fuck major labels and all this stuff. Where my attitude was a little bit more friendly toward like, I just want to pay music, and if somebody wants to give me a nickel for it, then like, who am I to object to that? Like, you want to give me a nickel or two? I'm down. Like, so it just didn't jive with me, the whole mentality of that music scene at that time. I grew to love Fugazi as a band a lot, and I totally understand why they, took that approach with their band. And then I also, at the time, in this little neighborhood out in the suburbs of DC, I was going to school with the drummer of this band called Scream. And so I had this kind of like really upfront look at like what it meant to be in a real touring band. They were like playing like bigger venues and like they had records out and shit. So I'm like kind of watching my buddy Dave, like, and he actually one day in, I think it was geometry class, Mr. Ziobro, Dave's not there, and Dave was very prone to skipping school, but this was like 4, 5, 6 days in a row. And I'm like, wonder what's up with that dude, And it turned out that he quit school to do Scream full time. And I'm like, wow, that's balls, And his mom's like a school teacher. I'm like, shit, like that's commitment.
Yeah.
And I caught up with him eventually, and went over and hung out with him. I was like, dude, you quit school to fucking do your band. That's crazy, And he was telling me, yeah, we got this whole tour planned. And then he was telling me about how they had played in LA and how they were parked getting, at a newsstand or something. And he told me this great story about running into Steve Jones from the Sex Pistols.
Oh, wow.
It just sounded so amazing to me, the whole thing. And Dave was like one of these guys that like was a mega shredder from day one. Anybody that knew him, anybody that saw him or was in a room with him and a drum kit, like you'd be like, whoa, So he was a total killer. And I remember at that point where I was like, we already quit school and all that. And like, maybe if the Scream thing doesn't play out or whatever, in my mind, being that my family is from Los Angeles, and at the time I'm living in DC, in my mind, LA was always the goal. I was like, dude,
the place to go.
I'm like, dude, you should go to LA. And at the time, this will like give you the date of the experience. The drummer of Motorhead quit, Filthy Phil Taylor, or died or quit or whatever. No, I think he just quit. And they got Mickey D. And I was like, Dave, you should join Motorhead. That's totally what you should do. Go to LA and join Motorhead. So fast forward, this story is actually going somewhere. I leave DC. I really decide like, okay, I like some of the bands, some of the people. And like I'm watching the one guy who I know who really has his shit together, Like I'm watching them like bang it out in vans and like do their and
Yeah.
like stories are pretty rad and like I'm into it. But like if I'm gonna do that, why don't I be a small fish in a bigger sea and take myself to LA? And if I have to do a van tour with a band there, then at least like I'm in a bigger environment
Yeah.
for it, you know? So I came out here and I hooked up with this guy, Sean Stern, who's in the band Youth Brigade.
Oh yeah, yeah. BYO Youth Brigade Punk
BYO.
Rock
And so we
Bowling.
had,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
so he and I, like, I moved in with him, and like we had this band, and
Wait
like,
a minute. Were you in the commune? Did you live in the punk rock commune that I heard about?
no, that's
No.
that's
Okay.
a few years before my time.
Okay.
Sean by
Okay.
then had moved to Venice.
Okay.
Yeah, we lived in like a little guest house, and we played in this band together, and that was so I did van tours with Sean and our little band called That's It, and that kind of inched me into kind of this scene with other bands. Like we started playing with Down by Law,
Okay.
and then I joined Down by Law. I left Sean's band and I joined Down by Law, and so then I was in this Epitaph scene, and then I skipped Down by Law to join Joy Killer, which was kind of another more promising, I thought, Epitaph band from that world. And then sort of somewhere in there, reverting back to the previous tangent about Dave, I guess it's right around the time when I was starting to tour with Sean. I hear that Dave's in town, and Dave had some stuff of mine, some records, and so I kind of wanted to like hook up with him,
Yeah.
But there was this weird mystery behind like, well, the rest of the band's here, but he left. And it's like this whole weird thing went down, and it's like,
Yeah.
where the fuck is he? So I called other friends of mine back in DC. What the fuck's up with Dave, And he had come back to DC, I guess, to get his shit. And, he probably just in the spirit of not wanting to jinx anything. He hadn't said anything, but Dave had joined this band called Nirvana. And that's why
That's wild.
that's where he went. And so I say all of that to say, if I ever give you business advice, like take it with a grain of salt. Because if David listened to me, he would have been a
do the
Motorhead, which would
opposite.
have been fine.
Yeah.
But there would have never been a Nirvana,
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So
Wow.
that's kind of how all that happened. And then it was sort of through the Epitaph thing. The Fishbone circle kind of overlaps with a lot of different, it's like the 6 degrees are crazy,
Sure.
with like every band from every scene, like shit you wouldn't believe, like really tight links with Jeff Buckley, with Tool, with Rage, with, you name it. I didn't even know this. My own bandmates, they did that, what's that guy's name? Young MC. They did Bust a Move. Angelo, Ben Folds, and Norwood did a cover of Bust a Move in a Priceline.com commercial. So, like, my dudes just kind of get around, and they're just kind of everywhere. So they were always around. And I remember even when I was living with Sean, like, Chris walking down the street with, like, a girl on either arm, like, being like, wow, that's that dude from Fishbone. And then I started to realize,
Oh, that's wild.
yeah, totally. So they were always around. And, like, especially some of them are kind of West Side hangers like me. So, and that's when I started to get clued in when I would see Norwood in the grocery store, like, late at night. I'm thinking, like, this dude lives around here, And eventually I started just saying hi, like, and I wasn't going to necessarily fanboy out and be like, hey, I played with your band, and da-da-da-da. But I would just...
And paint the picture for me real quick. What store was it? Is it like a Vaughn's? Is it a Ralph's? Is it a Whole Foods?
I'm glad you asked. So at the time, it was a Lucky's. And it's not just any Lucky's. It was previously Market Basket, I believe. And then it was Lucky's. Okay. Now it's Ralph's. And it's a weird corner, just like it's a weird Bermuda Triangle. Because, as I said, my family's from Los Angeles. The elementary school my dad went to is across the street.
Oh, wow.
It is the grocery store that Henry Rollins was in with Joe Cole.
Oh, yeah, that unfortunate shooting thing. Yeah. Ooh.
And so and like our apartment, my wife heard the shot and was like, went to the window to look and saw the dude run. She's the only person that I know of that saw the dude run. Then the police came and put Henry in the car and all that shit, which I guess is standard during shooting situations or whatever.
Yeah.
And all happened on that one little Bermuda Triangle block where we used to live. And I lived in a group house there with this guy Scott Garrett, who was in a big punk band called Dag Nasty, and then was later in the band The Cult.
Oh yeah. Okay.
Total shredder badass. And then our other roommate, this is totally badass, was this like graffiti artist, just contrarian, just like, I can't even describe him, just an artist out of his mind kind of, named Eric Brunetti, who had a little clothing line, and he had a little tag that he did all around the west side, F-U-C-T, fucked. And that was his clothing line. And about 3 years ago, I started seeing shit, and I'm like, that can't be the same dude. And I'm like, but wait a minute, it's gotta be. Eric Brunetti was denied being afforded a trademark protection for his brand F-U-C-T because it resembles the profane word, F-U-C-K-E-D. So he took it to the Supreme Court and he won.
I remember that brand from like Thrasher magazine back in the day. You know. Wow.
And it's funny you bring up Thrasher because somewhere there's a picture of me when I was in that band with Sean. There's a picture of me and Scott, like we're behind Dave Grohl's Riser. He's playing with L7 in Thrasher. So there you go. Bringing it all together.
That's wild, man.
But yeah, so that was that particular market basket, or Lucky's at the time. I saw Norwood, and I would be seeing him, and I remember seeing him on the freeway and being like, "That's that guy. That's the Fishbone guy again," you know. And then at some point, I had a job where I was getting up early, and I've always been an avid runner. And then I really started to see him because he's a runner. But he's a little faster than I am, so I never really could keep pace to like be like, hey, you know. But I would always see him. It just always became a thing. And then at one point, we were in either 99-cent store or Whole Foods. I can't remember. It's one of the ones in that little mini mall at Lincoln and Rose. And I was just like, okay, I got to just be formal here. I go, dude, I'm always running into you. I'm from DC. I played in this band, that band, out here with Sean, and was Now by Law and Joy Killer, blah, blah, blah. And we have this and that person in common. And he's like, cool, man. And he goes, what do you do now? I go, well, I'm doing this TV music thing. And he's like, hit me up if you need a bass player. I'm like, yeah,
okay,
let's do that. I'm like, yes, let's do that. I like that plan.
Heck yeah.
And then I get this message a few days later, and it literally just said, hey, Mark, Norwood, Fishbone, let's get it cracking. And I was like, that's all I need to hear.
Okay, yeah.
So he came over, and we just immediately, it was just that thing where, like, it was right around the time that we did a few things together, actually, because that happened later. But we just would sit there and shoot the shit, you know, in my studio and, you know, work on tracks or whatever. And the story that was sticking in my mind was when that thing happened with Glenn Danzig getting punched in the face.
Oh, Northside Kings! Huh!
Yeah, exactly. So Norwood, like that all like Norwood was like at my studio or whatever, and I was like, God, did you see this thing? And he's like, what? And I was like, check this out. He's like, God damn, that was pretty gnarly, you know. So we would just sit there and shoot the shit and just, we just became friends. And it happens we have kids the same age, same little general like floating pattern. And I think I recently posted on Instagram like a picture of he and I saying, it's uncanny how often I run into this guy. Like we're just tethered by, something in the universe.
Yeah.
The dude is like totally my brother. And so what ended up happening as our friendship grew and as Fishbone cycled through several member changes, I think the thought probably occurred to both of us, like, I wonder if it would ever make sense. I think it definitely occurred to me, and at some point it occurred to him. And years kind of go by, and we started making this habit of just, we had lunch like a lot, like at the Whole Foods at Lincoln and Rose. Like that was just our spot, our jam. We would just catch up. And he would kind of, fill me in on kind of what was happening with the band, which usually was fairly bonkers, like at that time, especially because it was like during the era when dudes were in and out. And I think that there came some sort of realization where the acumen that I had developed in terms of production, business, just, I think at a certain point he's like, this guy's actually got a decent head on his shoulder. And, like we began to kind of talk a little bit more about, the business and how this, that, like, he would fill me in on this thing and that thing. And, there's sort of these 6 degrees of separation where it's not that different in if for them to get a song placed in a David Arquette movie as they were at the time or whatever, that's not that's in my lane. Like that's something that I was like, oh yeah, well, cool. Well, you should make sure that, you keep publishing if you can, and blah, blah, blah. You know what I mean? Just like we're able to kind of like just talk about shit in a way that I think at a certain point, and I kind of remember the moment he was sitting in my studio, and I think Rocky had left. I think they had Rocky from Suicidal in the band for a long time.
Oh, dang.
I think he was actually gone.
Yeah.
And he was listening to some stuff that I was working on, and he was kind of zoned out. And I was slightly like, oh shit, I'm like totally boring my friend here. And I was like, oh, so let me turn this on. And he's like, no, keep it on.
Oh, that's good.
I'm like, okay. And then the track finishes and he goes, I think you're meant to be in Fishbone at some point.
And you're like, yeah, okay. Like today? Yeah. That's awesome.
And so and then like they were doing this special one-off where the original 6 all got together.
Okay.
So that's without all the replacement guys. And then when that happened, that put on everybody's radar. And I think they dropped like a Facebook picture or something at the time of all of them together. And that gets even funnier with just how we run into each other. When they were planning that little thing, I was walking down sort of near Santa Monica Airport by The Counter, which is Oprah Winfrey's favorite burger, for those of you who need to know. Walking past The Counter, and not only do I look in at, well, first off, I hear a voice, which like, I've always said, like, there's 2 people who before my name even comes out of their mouth, like I know who it is, and it's my dad and Norwood.
Yeah.
And so I hear this, Mark! And I'm like, uh-oh. I'm like, where's Norwood? And I turn around, and he's like reaching out his head out of the counter, and he's like, come on in. Like, come on in. And I'm like, this isn't just Fishbone. This is like none of the replacement dudes. This is all the original dudes. And they're all sitting there at the counter.
Yeah.
And he's like, have a seat. And I'm like, holy shit. Like, this is fucking crazy. Like, because they had not been together in ages. They had to work out whatever they had to work out.
Yeah. They
were going to do, and they did end up doing this one-off situation. And that brought them closer. So that was just a trip to run into them during that. And then they did that gig.
Oh, hey, Mark, Angelo is, we got Angelo in the waiting room. So let's see if we can bring him in, huh?
All right, let's do it.
Okay. Let's see if it works. Angelo from Fishbone. How's it going?
I made it! Listen, you fuckers, you screwheads, here's a man that wouldn't take it anymore. I made it to the last 3 minutes of the meeting.
Yes.
All good, bro.
Oh, God.
Yeah.
Man, I've been on the run all day, boy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, let me put a little light now. I can't see my face. Okay.
All right. Yeah, so let me introduce, like, why we're here. Mark and Angelo, among some other esteemed members of the LA community, worked on an album with me for my production music library. And I don't know if I told y'all the name of it, but the name of the album, we couldn't just have some random whack style album title. So I'm going to call it Upbeat and Abstract. So this isn't a normal run-of-the-mill type collection of songs. This is unique, outside of the box, forward-thinking type music. So I called it Upbeat because it's upbeat and then abstract,
That's right. Well, that's always good. It's always good to have in a world where it's straight and uniform.
Definitely, especially like with music for TV. Music for TV, it's always pretty much about the same things.
If we're about expanding, right? Yeah, you were freezing up there, but yeah, we are about expanding and breaking the rules, man.
Yeah, heck yeah, all day.
Doesn't it make you want to just float away on the driftwood, Angelo?
Fuck the establishment and fuck the establishment just trying to establish me.
So that's a little reference to one of the songs for the album.
Yeah, that's true. And hot dog on a stick.
Hot diggity dog, hot dog. Yeah, with all the brass stuff in it and the drums and yeah. It's a fun one. The whole thing was fun.
Believe me, dude, I always think to myself, there's always a market out there other than just the mainstream. Out there in the underground and the avant-garde culture and our subcultures, where it's a lot of people that like eclectic and unusual music, free-spirited music that doesn't necessarily follow.
Oh yeah, and you could hear it. Go ahead.
Like a lot of the regular formulas that you hear with a lot of music nowadays on the radio and stuff, and that's the kind of stuff I listen to, man. I don't even have a radio in my car. So I just got a CD player, so I get to have all my personal music that I like, that I've collected off from all over the world. Sometimes when I'm listening to Alexa in there, I listen to the radios, reggae, Alpha Boys, school radio, or maybe some classic or something like that. Or a lot of times I'll have the Zone Drone playing, in my house.
What's the Zone Drone?
The drone zone, where it's got all of these different types of drones.
Huh. Well, I wanted to ask you guys, I moved to LA in 2006, and then I left LA in 2019. So I want to know about some LA bands from the 90s and the 80s that I might not have been exposed to in my life. I'm on a LA kick because I miss LA a lot. I miss it. My first place I lived in LA was on Hoover and Olympic in Pico Union. I lived there for a few years, and it was my favorite spot that I lived in LA. Then I lived in Silver Lake and Van Nuys. But what are some bands that I missed out on, like in the 90s, like in LA, that you could remember? No matter if they were big, popular, not popular, just shout out some names that I should look up.
I got Liquid Jesus, Red Cross.
Red Cross, I remember them guys.
Yep. They've been at it. They're roughly around the same as Fishbone, like 79.
Man, I was just gonna say, the Beat Farmers, the Country Dick singing. Oh, it's all done? Dude, I just got my piano tune.
I'm going to tell you about Red Cross.
You got it. Tell me.
So after the LA earthquake in 93, there was kind of like the COVID of the 90s where a bunch of people left LA. Yeah. They just moved out because they were kind of on the fence about leaving LA in the first place, and the earthquake came, and they said, we gotta go.
Forget it.
So Florida was flooded with LA music people moving to Florida, kind of like how I did it, but I did it before COVID, so I didn't do it This doesn't apply to me, in other words. I'm saying don't lump me in with this, but you might want to lump me in with this. I don't know. But anyway, so one of the folks that moved to Florida was this guy, Pete Levine. He was a keyboard player in LA, and he used to regale me with stories about performing. I don't think it was at the Beverly Hills Hotel, but it was like a place like that. Maybe it was like the Bel Air Hotel or some place in Beverly Hills that had a piano lounge. And he said his claim to fame was playing on a Red Cross album.
There you go.
And I thought he meant Red Cross like the charity
Right.
company. So for years, I thought that's what he meant until I heard about Red Cross, the band, KROSS.
Yes.
So for years, I was like, wow, this guy played on a Red Cross. He plays for the Red Cross, you know?
No, Red Cross the band is actually this weird little petri dish that like he's not one to go around with a lot of swagger about it, but like Steve McDonald's only 2 years older than me, but like has been in the game since he's 11 for real. Like Red Cross, he's like 11. You know, he was like literally listening to the New York Dolls at 7. You know
That's
what I mean?
wild.
He's like that dude. So they start Red Cross, he's 11 years old. They're like playing Madame Wong's and shit, and dude is 12, 13 years old. And then like, again, he's not really that aggro about his rep or whatever, but like, I thought it was hilarious on Instagram where someone referred to the Gun Club, who is that's another really important LA band. But somebody made a reference kind of inferring that like, that in this flyer that like the Gun Club was like, you know, in somehow sort of this elder statesman status, and Steve was like, you know,
Elder Statesman. That should be the name of a band.
Elder Statesman.
But Steve McDonald's is kind of like, you know, we were a band before they were.
Yeah.
I was 11, and I think we had played out of town and shit, and played in San Francisco and all through LA. And importantly, you don't get the Circle Jerks and you don't get Black Flag without, and you really don't get Bad Religion without Red Cross, because you got Greg Hedson.
Really?
Yeah, they had Greg Hedson on guitar, man. Okay. Like back in the day. So
yeah.
And just as writers, like they always kind of leaned toward power pop, bubblegummy, like just super, I don't know, bubblegum, that might be a bad description, but just good, strong pop music. Red Cross is an awesome band. Steve is also in the Melvins.
No offense plays bubblegum.
No
What's
offense,
bubblegum?
plays bubblegum.
Yeah, they're bubblegum kings.
Yeah, I mean, but the other band who I think is, you know, they're a de facto LA band now, is the Melvins.
Oh yeah.
The Melvins too. The Melvins are good. I remember seeing the Melvins, and the Melvins played. They played with their stage setup was them facing each other in a C shape. I thought that was the coolest shit.
Okay.
Man, they were like, fuck the audience. We need to make sure this music is right.
Yeah.
Well, now Steve McDonald is in the Melvins, so it's all full circle.
Is he really?
He really is, yeah. Yep.
Man, that's wild.
Yeah,
So,
LA has this incestuous thing. Like,
oh yeah.
Angelo is kind of one of the only, like, Angelo is you know, like our band has been through so many lineup changes, and so has every other fucking band out there. And like, you know, I think we're the only one that never stopped, you know, and never had another, like, and it's been nonstop since, what was it, Angelo, 8th grade? Or is he?
Oh, I think
he's off with the piano tuner.
He's out with the piano
Yeah, I think
tuner.
those guys all they were, you know, shit was like kind of hot here as far as like trying to figure out to do. There were racial issues, there were educational issues at the time in the late 70s, and so a lot of the guys were bused to the Valley, which is sort of the suburban community.
Kind of like NWA too, right? It was like that was kind of the same.
That's totally makes sense. They're totally the right age for that. Yep. The busing situation kind of created the situation where these guys that were from a neighborhood where they would not necessarily have seen a lot of skateboarding and bleached hair and mohawk.
Yeah.
So like, you know, that they were kind of like, okay, this is cool. Let's do this thing. You know?
Yeah.
it ends up being this whole full circle thing. Is that, you know, as I said earlier, my family's roots are in LA, and they're in that community. So were it not for a glorious military career in the Vietnam War, I would have grown up in that area. But my dad, we moved. I'm an LA native. I was born here, but just, you know, the U.S. Army had me growing up in Berlin and in D.C.
Oh, and then back to LA, it kind of drew you back a little bit.
LA was always the thing. I never really, in fact, little known fact is that service members are not required to change their driver's licenses. At the time, I don't know what it is now, that you had 7 years, because otherwise you'd spend half your life in the DMV if you're getting transferred to different states and different.
Yeah.
So my dad always had a California license wherever we were, always.
Yeah, I felt bad giving mine away, you know, leaving, you know, because my plan was to come to Florida just for a few months and then go to Asia and do a whole Asian music catalog.
Oh, wow.
Like a whole thing. I had it all planned out. We're going to do all this content. And then, you know, New Year's Day, I got a text message from a big money film composer in China and said, hey, you might want to keep an eye on this mystery pneumonia.
Ooh.
And I was like, it's probably nothing. I'll wear a mask. It'll be fine. And so there you go. That was January 1st, 2020, you know?
Wow. So dude might have saved you from getting COVID.
Yeah, or at least being marooned out there, like kind of stuck. I mean, I'm sure I could have made my way back, but it would have been a lot more arduous than being here in Florida already with my family. And, you know, I just bought a house. Now the house is on Airbnb. That's a whole thing. Man, dude, that's wild. I wanted to ask before we wrapped up, how did you like to, because obviously there's Angelo's on the album, you're on the album, Josh Freeze is on the album, and I forgot the brother, is it Eric or
Fish Fisher is on the album. Drummer extraordinaire, and Scott Shifty.
Scott, yeah. So how were you able to work with all those musicians during COVID? You know, there's a lot. It's not like they all live under the same roof anyway, and then add on that COVID. How do you coordinate all that? That seems like a logistical feat in itself. You know,
it was not that easy. It required a lot of flexibility. But at the end of the day, our brotherhood kind of, it was just like, with each like initial text, it was like, hey dude, I need you. You know, and it's like, okay, what do you got? What do you need? It's like, I got these tracks, and we just tried to work it out. And Freeze is you know, Angelo knows, like, dude, I need you.
Yeah.
I need you, and I need it today.
That was the funny part. The today part. I was like, don't this motherfucker know how unrealistic this shit is?
Well, I knew that today meant next week, and that all worked out. So.
Yeah.
But I'm going to tell you what it reminded me of.
What?
It reminded me of McFly in the fucking movie.
Back to the Future?
Back to the Future.
Right.
God damn it, McFly. I didn't say.
Why?
I'm like, oh, shit. So I thought to myself, man, the motherfuckers who Mark is probably working with is like, come on, Mark, we need this, man. Wall Street's closing in.
Yeah, I mean, in the sense that, you know, it is, you know, these projects are like for film and TV and stuff like that. It is, you don't have forever to do them. So.
I wish that'd be nice, you know.
The movie soundtrack industry is what you're talking about, right?
Gratification right now from when they first hear that song in the first 5
seconds or 10 seconds or some shit like that in it. And if they don't hear it, it's easy for them to say, nope, that ain't it. I need for you to make another one up for me right now. And so, right? And that's pretty much the feeling I got. And so with that, you can't really put too much feeling into it, or you can't put too much passion into it for the simple fact they just might go, nope, that ain't it. Give me another pancake.
Mm.
It doesn't really give you too much time to like really just get really, really dig down deep into it, because you got to have it fast now.
But the way I see it is like you're right. That first 5 seconds, there's a lot of science that I have accumulated over the years with how to get attention in that. Because you're right. I think it's a little more generous than that. I think like first 10, 15 seconds. You really do. You're right. You have to set it up, and you are totally right. They will be on to the next quicker than quick if it's not grabbing them or doing what they need it to do. Here's what's worse is, and particularly like in ads, is that like, sometimes you're working for free and it'll be like, we want something that's like really specific to the 1920s, and we really need that vibe. And you go through whatever machinations to really make that happen. And then you get an email or a call that says like, oh, you know what? We decided to go with 80s goth techno.
Yeah.
So they changed directions on you, right?
Yeah.
It happens.
Like chasing the damn chicken.
It happens.
Yeah. Or I got one time, it goes, we want an upbeat sports-based rap song about winning. Okay, so we did it, and then they go, oh, wait, we wanted an instrumental. We weren't looking for full songs with vocals. Well, I go, how's it supposed to be about winning if there's no words in it?
Right.
I mean, yeah, I feel what you're saying. Ugh.
Then it might come to a thing to where the person is asking for the song, the corporate, they know what they hear, but they don't know the words to use to explain in a musician's vernacular to tell you what they want. Then when you get it back to them, they go, no, that's not what I want. And then they explain something else. So then I found that I've had to learn how to translate what the person wants. Like they say, oh, I want this song to sound like a bed of flowers with a couple of little Cheerios on the side and some cotton balls in the middle. And you're thinking, okay, what does that sound like? Okay, what do they mean? Oh, maybe salsa with a little bit of a little swing on it there. And you got to translate it like that in order to give them what they want. So I find that is a skill I've had, because I remember there was a time when I didn't have that skill, man. Being in the studio, I remember we were in the studio with David Kahn doing something, man. And that's back when we didn't know how to say what we wanted, but we knew how to play it. And I remember going through that stage of my life where, because I didn't know the vernacular to explain what I wanted, shit ended up getting mixed up or not. It didn't come out the way we wanted because of translation between the musician, the corporate, or the musician and the producer. If you don't know how to say, the right words put together, then you get misunderstood, and then you make mistakes. You got to go back, take some more time, all that.
Oh yeah, it gets off track. No pun intended. Well, guys, thanks so much for joining me. That was a lot of great info.
Awesome.
And I'll let you know once we get a release date for the album Upbeat and Abstract, and once I get artwork. We could also vibe offline about artwork too. I want to make sure that y'all are